Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to talk a little bit about BFRBs today. I have really just loved learning about them and the opportunity to treat them at Light on Anxiety. We have a fair amount of really helpful trainings on BFRBs, but kind of my goal for today is to dig in a little deeper and talk about sort of definitely some of those best practices and approaches, and also thinking about ways to treat it like across the lifespan for clients that we see at LOA. So in terms of what we're going to go through today, I'm going to just give a definition of BFRBs. I think most of us are probably somewhat familiar, but it's helpful to sort of redefine them. A little bit of quick history around BFRBs, kind of from a literary and diagnostic standpoint, which I thought was sort of interesting. We'll talk about the onset and the course of symptoms. I have some stories that I want to share, and talking a little bit more about the BFRB experience, again, across sort of one's life and what that looks like. We'll talk about co-occurring disorders, and I'll share a little more information in terms of intake process with BFRBs and some assessment tools that we have for you. And then we'll get into BFR treatment at LOA. I've got a little more information on some clinical nuances when working with BFRBs, recovery resources and such. And then I would love to try, if I can budget my time, I'll try to have about the last 10 minutes or so for questions, or if there are any cases, I would love to hear more on that. So feel free to kind of just throw any questions or thoughts into the chat as I'm going through. So BFRBs, or body focused repetitive behaviors, I'll kind of refer to them as their shorthand for this presentation, are any repetitive self-grooming behaviors that involve biting, chewing, pulling, picking, or scraping one's own hair, skin, or nails that result in damage to the body. And this next part is important: have been met with multiple attempts to decrease or stop the behavior. So it's something that the client actively, has tried or really wants to stop, and is kind of struggling to do so. On the right-hand column, I have kind of, a not fully comprehensive list, but I did want to share a list. I would say at LOA, most commonly, you'll see clients that have trichotillomania, or trick, I'll call it for short, skin picking, and some nail biting. But I also want to call out some of the lesser prevalent ones, like cheek biting. I've been known to do that myself. Nose picking, typically you might see that with some of the little ones. Eating of the skin, eating of the hair, cutting of one's own hair is actually one as well that's lesser talked about. So a little bit in terms of some history, I kind of geek out to this stuff. I thought it was interesting. So the reason that I wanted to share this is because, to me, it's really noteworthy that, only in the last, couple of decades have we really had these, had BFRBs in any of our DSMs, right? So way back in Aristotle's era, 340 BCE, he referenced, I'm going to butcher the name of it, but Nicomachean Ethics. He referenced plucking out hair and gnawing on nails, right? So it's been around for quite some time. Later in 1889, sort of more on the medical side, there was a French dermatologist, again, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce his name, and he first used the term trichotillomania, but it wasn't until, almost 100 years later that then trick appeared in what was then the DSM-3R, and then not until 2013 did we have skin picking in that first version of the DSM-5. So this is just noteworthy to me because I still feel like there's more to learn, there's more research to be done, and what really stands out to me is they've been so prevalent, they've been talked about, they've been well known, but we really haven't had a lot of time to dig in deeper on them. Okay, I won't go through this whole piece of info, but a lot of the data that I have on here is from the a book I'm going to be referencing a couple times, which is the BFRB recovery book, or workbook rather, that came out just last year. And so there's some really interesting newer data in there that I wanted to share with you all. We know that BFRBs can begin at any point in life, but what studies tell us is that they typically start kind of during pre-puberty or, kind of onset of puberty around that 11 to 15-year-old age. We also know that trich tends to start a little earlier than skin picking starts. And I'll be honest, I don't know if there's any correlation between like skin picking and, obviously at that age there can be like hormonal skin changes or things like that. I'd be curious to learn a little more about that, but I kind of thought that was noteworthy. And then there's also a difference in terms of the average age onset for trich between teenage folks who identify as females versus folks who identify as males. So I kind of wanted to call that out as well. We also know that young children, right, that infancy to early childhood may experience what we call baby trich. And that tends to manifest as a self-soothing behavior. So kind of thinking about it developmentally, as well as, we'll talk a little bit about like co-occurring disorders. You can see that in the young kids as well. Generally, they're considered chronic, they're treatable, but their course waxes and wanes over time. Also worth noting, again, thinking about BFRBs across the lifespan, compulsive nail biting is thought to decrease a bit with age. So just kind of noticing that discrepancy between like almost 50% of kids through early adolescence reported, and then kind of as we age up, we see a decrease there. So again, the prevalence of BFRBs, as many as 1 in 20 people experience BFRBs, although that's likely underreported. We know that the causes are, there's likely a biological and environmental component to those causes. There's also some study, more recently 2016, that suggests that genetic susceptibility is a factor, right? So you might have younger clients that come in and parents want them to work on a BFRB, and often parents will disclose, I've struggled with skin picking or hair pulling myself. And so they kind of note that, and you might tend to see that in terms of something that impacts child and adolescent clients. Clients can pull from a wide range of areas on their body, so pretty much anywhere that hair grows, and same with skin picking sites. One thing I also wanted to call out is that, so there's clients that also pick or pull from other objects, right? So sometimes that's like pets or partners. Sometimes that's, blankets or pillows or wigs. So something to note on that as well. But again, because mild nail biting is so common, it's likely underreported. And really embarrassment, shame, and efforts to camouflage or hide the behavior in the affected area are a hallmark with BFRBs. So I feel like for us as clinicians, in terms of how we broach it with a client, that's really important to hold on to. There's a lot of misconceptions, unfortunately, about BFRBs. And so I wanted to take a minute to call those out here. I thought this little Venn diagram was helpful, but I recognize there's a lot of text on there. But they're certainly not a form of OCD, and they're very much not a form of self-harm or NSSI. I mean, the key difference there is that, self-harm behaviors are typically intentionally carried out to cause pain and or relief, whereas BFRBs are unwanted behaviors that individuals, struggling to stop. They'd like to stop it, and they struggle with that piece of it. BFRBs are not just bad habits that can be stopped. I think you might, unfortunately, you might see that sometimes, again, for parents, kind of like they'll try to call their child out when they catch them, maybe with their hands in their mouth, things like that. If it's a BFRB, it's really not that simple. And clients are not always aware of their BFRBs. So many clients experience unfocused BFRBs. You tend to see this with, again, this is across the lifespan, sort of when clients get into almost like a trance-like or distractible state. A lot of times that happens like watching TV or playing video games. Adults tend to do it a lot, maybe when they're like in the car. They don't even realize that it's happening. And then, they show up to session and they're like, I'm bleeding, for example. So that would be an example of an unfocused versus a focused BFRB. And they're definitely not easy to stop or control. For some people, this is a lifelong struggle that they really want to work on. So I wanted to share this brief video. It's about 10 minutes long. I'll try to share most of it. So Anila Idnani is she is one of the leaders, and she helps with like the social, I think she does a social media app for Habit Aware. Her story is super just meaningful and deep. And she also, so she'll share more. So I'll go ahead and start this off for you.
I have a secret to share. This is a secret that I've held on to for more than 25 years. When it began at age 12, even I wasn't aware of what was happening. And that confusion led me to hide. From then until now, from parents to best friends to even my own husband, I made sure no one was aware of this secret. I, Anila Idnani, pull out my hair. My hair pulling was subconscious and compulsive. Have you ever heard of someone who pulls out their hair without being aware that it's happening? It's weird, right? Well, that's what I thought as a 12-year-old girl growing up. I thought I was weird, and I thought I was wrong for doing this damage to myself. I thought that I was wrong and damaged. And as I grew into my high school years, I watched my father battle and lose to leukemia. And my own battle with hair pulling intensified. I felt alone, I felt afraid, but I am so far from it. 1 in 20 Americans are just like me. Hurting in hiding. That's 100 people in this room who are just like me. I am not alone, and neither are you. As I grew into my early 20s, Dr. Google made me aware of the facts. My hair pulling was a coping mechanism for stress, anxiety, and boredom. It was a mental health disorder with a name, trichotillomania. Trichotillomania is part of a broader group of mental health disorders that includes compulsive skin picking, also known as dermatillomania, and chronic nail biting, also known as onychophagia. These collectively are known as body-focused repetitive behaviors. As if this struggle wasn't enough, I have to contend with all of these syllables. Do you know how hard it is to write body-focused repetitive behavior awareness tweets? I do, and it doesn't stop me because I know we need awareness of these disorders for my community to come out of hiding and into healing. Body-focused repetitive behaviors are the most common disorder you have never heard of. If it's not you who is hurting and hiding, it's someone you know, it's someone you love. We hide because we are ashamed that our hands are doing this to ourselves. We hide because we are scared of your judgment. Ew, you do what? That's gross, why can't you just stop? We hide because we are afraid. Our hands are the gateway to the mind. Our thoughts fuel our emotions, which move our hands. When you're stressed, anxious, bored, maybe you reach for a cigarette, or maybe you reach for a bag of chips, or maybe you reach for your journal or the sky. Whatever you choose to reach for to cope, I see you. I see you. For BFRBers, the unsurety, the anxiety, the noise in our heads manifests in our hand movements too. Except we reach for our hair, our skin, our nails, the things that make us beautiful. Not because we want to, but because we just can't stop. And all I want is for you to see us. I was finally seen in late 2013. I was on maternity leave with my 3-month-old baby boy. Maternity leave was stressful and exhausting. Blessed with a happy, healthy child who slept a lot, maternity leave was also really boring. And the hormones were all over the place. Boredom, and hormones. A Molotov cocktail for my mind. The hair-pulling urges exploded, and my hands became ever more uncontrollable. One day, as I was getting ready in the morning, going to grab my partner in crime for the last 25 years, my black eye pencil, to cover up the damage I had done, I bumped into my partner in life, my husband, Samir. And with loving curiosity, he looked at me and said, "Anila, where are your eyebrows?" In that moment, I saw him, ready to be there for me, and I shared my hair-pulling secret. Not with such confident vulnerability that I have here with you all today. You see, in 2013, I was caught, frozen in shame. And I chose to stop sweeping my hair pulling under the rug. Over the next few weeks, I let him into my world. His biggest question was why I didn't just make him aware in the first place. Why I was hiding and holding on to all that shame. And then one day, as we're sitting on the couch and I'm mindlessly pulling, he gently grabbed my hand, and I gently resisted the urge to punch him. But in that moment, I knew what I needed to take control of my hair pulling was awareness of where my hands were. Nothing existed, so he and I, with 2 full-time jobs and a newborn baby, decided we got time for this. We're gonna set out and create a solution. We built our team, the Habit Aware team, and we built a smart bracelet that we call Keen. Keen uses custom gesture detection technology to bring awareness to where your hands are. You train Keen using our mobile app in a 30-second process that's recording your specific scanning motion onto the bracelet, much like a voicemail. When Keen senses a match, it sends a vibration, a hug on the wrist, to gently remind you, hey, your hands are not where you want them to be. That's enough to interrupt the pattern of behavior, allowing you to now make a choice. Now, with this power of awareness, you can choose healthier coping strategies. Will you all take a deep breath with me? As I used Keen, I heightened my awareness and recognized that late night working, stressed, was my #1 trigger. Now, I just close the computer and go to sleep. Sure, the work is there in the morning and the stress of it is there in the morning, but so are my eyebrows. I've not just regrown my hair, I've regrown my self-confidence, something I had lost for 20 years. But in the beginning, I wasn't sure of this power of awareness. But we've been met with overwhelming support from the BFRB community and funding from the National Institute of Health and the National Science Foundation in the form of research grants to further improve and develop our technology. And in 2018, we were humbled to be on the cover of Time magazine. All of this a testament to the work we are doing, to the legitimacy and the severity of body-focused repetitive behaviors and the need for our solution. My 12-year-old self, she'd never believe that she'd be up here on this red dot, sharing her story with all of you, with all of her eyebrows and all of her eyelashes, let alone start a company that's come to defeat the monster that once brought her so much despair. You see, growing up, my hair pulling fed a vicious cycle of negative self-speak, lack of self-confidence, and more hair pulling. In fear of being found out, I skipped out on pool parties and other social activities. Because I was pulling out my hair, I told myself I would never be good enough at anything and dropped playing saxophone. Despite my love for basketball and my skill for basketball, I skipped out on high school tryouts, afraid that running back and forth on the court would make me sweat and make my eye makeup run off. I was afraid I'd be found out. I was afraid my secret would be revealed. We, with BFRBs, we give up on the things we love, or we don't even go after them in the first place because we are so afraid and ashamed. But my work with Habit-Aware is changing that. We are shifting the conversation from shame and blame to compassion and understanding. Through our stories, we are shattering that shame. And now today, you are aware. Now you see us. Now you can go and you can take this power of awareness home with you and finally see that someone you know, someone you love, is hurting and hiding from their excessive and compulsive hair pulling, skin picking, or nail biting. With the power of BFRB awareness, your compassion can help them. And with the power of teen awareness, they can begin to help themselves. I wish you all love, strength, and awareness.
I think I misspoke too. She is the mobile app designer at Habit-Aware, but I really like how she tells her story and talks about it again, like, I mean, hiding it from her husband. And I love how she refers to BFRBs as like the most common disorder you've never heard of. That's super poignant and powerful. And yeah, she's doing great work. So thank you all for listening. TED Talks are always fun. I wanted to talk about sort of co-occurring disorders that we'll likely see. You can notice that a lot of these are some of the common things that we treat at Light on Anxiety. So certainly anxiety, depression, OCD, ADHD, panic, PTSD, et cetera, and then autism and tic disorder as well. So something to be mindful of kind of as you're working with clients here. And with that said too, so I mean, our intake process with some assessments for BFRBs. So you might see clients coming to you and expressing like a specific BFRB goal. And often you might see a child or a teenager whose parents come in and express interest in a focus on their BFRB, and the child does not, or the child is just not there yet. So I think it's important to call that out and acknowledge, that parent and child motivation to work on a BFRB may look different, and really explore the why. Why is there a discrepancy there? It's not that it bothers one person more than the other. One person wants to work on it more, but is that a component of what's going on? And how do you broach that really cautiously and mindfully with both parties or with all parties? We have some really great assessments that I wanted to call out. So the NIMH Trichotillomania Symptom Severity Scale, I linked that here. So that is on the assessments page, which is great. And some of these other tools I know are like in the shared drive or kind of across the board. There is the Milwaukee Inventory for Styles of Trick, both child and adult. There's also something called the GBS-8, which is measuring the severity of a BFRB. I linked that there as well. We have the Skin Picking Impact Scale and a couple of other resources. BFRB.org is a great hub for kind of all kinds of clinical tools for BFRBs as well. I think psychoeducation is huge when it comes to working with parents and kids in any regard related to BFRBs. I love this webinar that we have. I linked this here too, supporting the supporter. It's also from the Habit-Aware team, but it really, I think that's would be a helpful thing to watch if you're newer to BFRBs, or if you're kind of in a scenario like I mentioned, where maybe a parent wants for a child to work on BFRB, but they do not, because it helps with kind of some talking points and ways to engage both parties. And then I just shared a couple other ones on here. This book is really great, What to Do When Bad Habits Take Hold, and I have that linked as well. That's also from the shared drive. So just some resources for you. Center for Emotional Health is also a great hub as well. So when we talk about BFRB treatments and the gold standard, right, which we practice at Light on Anxiety, always coming in with the evidence-based lens, I'm going to talk about sort of two approaches and perhaps a way to even, leverage both or utilize both. So habit reversal training, I think, is often where we start. Love overcoming body focused repetitive behaviors. We all get this when we start here. That's going to really talk you through the fundamentals of habit reversal training, and the goal of that being to create a healthy replacement for the repetitive behavior. So often that focuses on, an element from one of these key areas in the SCAMP model. It could be a sensory replacement, a fidget or silly putty. There's so much out there these days. Could be thought replacement, motor places, etc. And then I'll also get into the COMB model. So COMB is kind of our shorthand for comprehensive behavioral treatment. So that's what we're referring to when we say COMB for shorts. Again, we love an acronym. I kind of wanted to talk you through the 4 stages, break it down a little bit. First part is building your awareness. That can start with self-monitoring forms. I'll share that they can be super helpful. I know sometimes when I'm working with a client with a BFRB, they start out being really great about self-monitoring, or that part can kind of wax and wane. So if you're experiencing that, I would just say, maybe it's about let's talk about other ways to engage. But I think ideally, if you can start to monitor or track a little bit, and I'll tell clients, even if that's just, kind of remembering sort of when you were picking or pulling and then bringing that to session, or, can you jot it down in your notes app or something like that? It doesn't have to be hard and fast by the book in terms of the SCAMP model, but getting some kind of a self-monitoring process going. Planning and preparation. So I really like this master list of interventions that we have, and I linked that in here. There's so much. I'll quickly share that with you all. So that starts right here on page 3. But it's got kind of everything under the sun with all of the domains. So linked that for you in case you haven't taken a peek at that before. But lots of options. And what I'll say too about BFRBs is that, I recognize that not everyone that we see may respond to or be able to purchase like a habit aware sort of resource, or use the Keen bracelet, or use a Fitbit or anything like that. And that's okay. There's lots of, there's things that people already have. There's free resources. I mean, you can sometimes use, someone's favorite soft bit of clothing. There's so much that you can do. Sometimes it's about hand placement or hand positioning, but great to have those resources as well. Taking action is huge. I want to talk about really tracking and highlighting progress. For me, I think one thing that has made a big difference is really, noting progress as not just how much or how little are you picking or pulling, but how engaged are you? Are you showing up ready to talk about it? Remembering that the shame and the embarrassment is such a hallmark of it. And so really trying to, I guess, challenge that, I suppose, and being hey, but we're you're really engaged in thinking about it, or you're really engaged in, sort of just coming up ready to be vulnerable and talk to me about it. That's a win. Let's work with that. Because oftentimes you'll hear people feeling success for them with their BFRB is really measured by what they're seeing, right? For example, or how they're, how much or how little they're engaged in it. And then evaluation and relapse prevention. And so that can look a little different for everybody, but that's kind of your time to talk about, the progress that we've made. How are we going to shift from reliance on working with me towards your own self-management and utilization of skills? That's really a nice time to employ creativity and trying to set someone up with various life stressors that may come their way. Their relapse prevention is probably going to look different when they're, in adolescence versus early adulthood. Different stressors are changing. So really trying to set them up for success with that in mind. In terms of I would say the other kind of gold standards. So the BFRB recovery workbook, as I referenced earlier, I am a big fan of. I will say I think it's relatively it's got great information, but it's kind of dense. So I find that it tends to be a little more effective with adults. If anybody wants to borrow a copy of it, I do have a copy. And this came out last year. And so really what integrated behavioral treatment is about is it's about how do we combine, some of the core tenets of CBT, ACT, and DBT to treat BFRBs. So ACT for BFRBs, a little different from HRT and COMBI, and it's really addressing experiential avoidance. So, you may find that there are some ACT tools. I think dropping anchor can be a great one to use. I know choice point is in this book as well. You can really kind of tailor ACT interventions for BFRBs, and you don't have to do too much in terms of tweaking them. DBT is certainly big for BFRBs as well. So I wanted to call out kind of some of the key principles and how to utilize those specific to BFRBs. With mindfulness, I mean, obviously, of course, being a non-judgmental observer of yourself and the present moment is extremely helpful when treating BFRBs. Also thinking about mindfulness of, your mind as your protector as well. So you might see clients feeling like feeling angry at themselves or frustrated with themselves, or sort of challenging, their mind in the way that they think about themselves and their BFRB. And so kind of working on a way to reframe that a little bit. For distress tolerance, I have found that people with BFRBs often really take to urge surfing as a skill. They can kind of relate that to the urge to pick or pull and kind of how do they ride that out. Tip skills are really helpful as well. I mean, there's so many different ways to leverage distress tolerance related to BFRBs. And then, of course, emotion regulation, big hallmark. That would be helpful as well. Want to increase the positive emotions and decrease vulnerability to negative emotions. So you do want to accept that negative emotions are going to be there. We can't have the negative without the positive, but that vulnerability that you feel that might drive your BFRB, let's talk about, ways we can practice feeling less vulnerable in those scenarios. Real quick, other key components. So again, this is looking at integrative behavioral treatment. So unlike SCAMP, but similar, the IBT sort of tracking tool, they call it the TIMES map. And so you'll have a similar tracking form, but instead of tracking the SCAMP model, you're tracking thoughts, images. I like that it calls out memories, both sensations and urges, awareness of vulnerabilities, and people, places, and spaces. So kind of those three things that can be things that perpetuate or trigger you to engage in your BFRB. I think the biggest components too, really being flexible and kind to oneself. I want to call that out because I often hear people feeling, they're punishing themselves after they pick or pull or bite, whether they're punishing themselves mentally or whether the behavior itself sort of serves as a cyclical form of punishment. And oftentimes just talking about, well, how are you rewarding yourself? Like what would feel like, a valid reward to you when you feel like you're doing well, or when you're just even neutral, like what feels rewarding to you? Adults can sometimes struggle with that because they'll be like, well, I don't mean, maybe like watching my favorite show, or like, you sort of have to explore different things for adults. Kids usually can think of rewards pretty readily, but sort of shifting that mindset as well from punishing yourself to rewarding yourself when you're doing fine or when you're doing well enough. Tracking progress, self-monitoring and self-check-ins, response prevention strategies, and then competing response training. And so what we mean by that is, again, so are you employing, if you know that maybe every time you go and see like your family for a big holiday, that those are people, places, and spaces that stress you out. What can we do while you're at that family event to be a competing response? And so maybe that's like, You can get some time away, like walking the family dog, or, can you change your physical response or things like that. Creating and maintaining an action plan, and definitely identifying cognitive distortions related to BFRBs. You'll likely hear those come up quite a bit, and that's a great time to practice reframes or, examine the evidence. There are people who have told themselves that this is just how it is, and this is going to be my life forever. And so kind of working with them on that and understanding, well, what if things could be different? Or what if, you could pick or pull or bite less? Like, what would that look like? Sort of inviting that reframe for them. Because for a lot of people, it's like a big part of just their defined identity. And with that, it's all about building confidence through self-efficacy, mastery of skills, mastery of the way that they conceptualize these things. And I'm a big fan of coping ahead as well. So sort of, again, once you're aware of some of the bigger things that stress you out, and you can use the stage of change model with that as well. How can you cope ahead for situations that might be tricky for you? Because inevitably, those are part of life. I want to take a minute to talk about some medications, some pharmacological treatment options. So I will say that as of right now, there are no FDA-approved medication for the treatment of BFRBs, but there are some medications out there that are commonly prescribed, and this would be a great thing to, if you're interested, certainly I've talked with Mary Grace or Lauren about it, or anybody else on the med management team. You'll likely see SRIs or SSRIs, which can be helpful for BFRBs. Also for adults, something called NAC, which is a glutamate modulator, can be beneficial, but it's not recommended for youth. I know that I have a client that is on NAC, and there can be like a side effect, I think, of like some headaches. So that's just something to hold on to. But I know that studies have shown that it's proven to reduce the urge to pick or pull. Another one more recently is a medication called memantine. A lot less data on that one, but that's typically used to treat in older adults, like memory issues, Alzheimer's, dementia, things like that. There's some efficacy in reducing picking and pulling behaviors. But again, I defer to the experts on that one. I just wanted to note that here. For youth, for children and teens, generally recommend, trying behavioral interventions first before pursuing medication. But if you have someone that you're working with and they're already on, say, an SRI or an SSRI for, depression or anxiety, it may benefit them still when it comes to their BFRB. So clinical nuances, I think I just wanted to call out a couple of different things. For me, it's all about like creative combinations, trying different things and modeling that adaptability over time. So, something might work for a little while and then things change, and kind of being that positive role model of like, let's figure out some other creative solutions, and just being willing to try different things, I think is really helpful with BFRBs. Oftentimes clients really want like that encouraging and accountability partner. So being an authentic cheerleader, I guess I'll call it, I think is really important. There's someone I've been working with here on her BFRB, and like, for her, it's about her nails, and like we've done nails together in session. Like, we're really just partnering with that person and being invested in their success in that way. Rolling with resistance is huge, and just other motivational interviewing techniques can definitely come in handy with BFRBs. As always, I think everybody here is affirming and non-judgmental, but I think that's a big part of BFRBs too, noting the prevalence of the shame and the guilt or negative self-talk. So, you might hear a client say like, well, I had a really bad week because I pulled out all of my eyelashes. Well, we want to validate that feeling, but we also want to help them to understand that there maybe were things about their week that still went okay, even though that happened. Being aware of the different life phases. So just keeping in mind that BFRBs, especially nail biting, tend to decrease as we age. And consider going back to the client's reason for wanting to work on their BFRB. So there's all different reasons why people want to work on it. client that I see, is a teacher, so she's up in school all the time, and so she's worried about getting sick more often with putting her hands in her mouth while like touching other things. It's a fair concern. For some people, it has to do more with aesthetics. And for other people, they're really just exhausted and they're tired of living with it for so many years. You may also see that a family member or a spouse requested it, but just really reminding them that setbacks with your BFRB are not failures. They can be expected and, more importantly, accepted. So follow this puppy's lead. And lastly, yeah, just wanted to share some resources. I tried to link everything I could in here. So a lot of great BFRB resources on the shared drive. On all LOA sites should have a Keen bracelet if ever you want to grab that. It's in like the areas where the staff where we store different things. So that's something you can kind of get out and play around with. And then our BFRB tracking form, I did a little screenshot there for you. Other resources, there are support groups. I did want to mention that for BFRBs, both virtual and in person. I know that can be another helpful resource for folks. And again, big fan of the BFRB recovery workbook if anybody's interested in borrowing my copy, although I have annotated a bit. But yeah, thank you all so much for taking the time to listen, and would love to hear from you if you have any questions or any cases that you want to talk through at this time. Yeah, Allison.
Hi, Susanna. Thank you. That was a really great presentation. I have a client who has significant learning disabilities and ADHD combined and maybe autism spectrum disorder. And she has a habit that is upsetting to pretty much everyone in her orbit, but it isn't any of these BFRBs. But I still wonder whether the habit aware bracelet could be utilized to help her. Do you happen to know?
Are you comfortable sharing what the habit is?
Yeah. She puts her hands in her pants when she's distressed.
Actually, it might be helpful for that. The reason that I asked is because I know that for some people, if the movement is like too minor, like like if it's just there, like if it's just this kind of a thing, habit awareness not great. But if it's that if it's that like big of a movement, I guess I'll call it, then it actually might help her with it's a gentle reminder. There's probably other resources out there she could try, but that's a great thought.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and if you see her in person, feel free to use you can kind of test the Keen out and see how it goes. Yeah.
Is it pretty, like, technology is not my forte. Is it pretty intuitive?
So, I think if you want to, there's like I can send you the website. They've got like some good video tutorials and things like that. So if you want like a quick, they're not super long. If you wanted to just get versed in it, I'm happy to send you that. It's relatively intuitive, but yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Allison, I'll just share as well. We have a really good resource. So the woman who works with us at Habit Aware, she's given us videos. They're all in the staff manual. I'll send them to you as well, but showing you how they work. And she has a training that's also, I believe that we require it in Paycom. So there's really, really good information on the Keen bracelet, Habit Aware. You can watch videos, demos with actual clients. She herself was a client of it and then became a very big supporter of it. So we have a really good connection there. If it's something that you're interested in, look on the staff manual. There's lots of videos there as well, and in Paycom.
My only question is, do you have to put it on your phone? Is that how it works?
It's a bracelet, and so it's a bracelet that you train. And so with the repetitive movement or whatever it is, so it actually, she'll explain. This is Ellen. If you guys have ever worked with Ellen, but she will show you that it really is this similar movements over and over. So if you're doing this versus this, that's going to make a big difference. And so you need to train the bracelet to whatever movement is the movement that you want to avoid. Then it will kind of give a little like vibration. There's reward systems in it. Like for kids, you can earn, rewards on the bracelet. So it's all connected to the bracelet. And then I believe there might be an app, of course, that you can see rewards and you can see
That
connections.
was my question. Yeah.
Yeah, but
I saw
it's the movement itself. It's the vibration of the bracelet. So they used to have like 2 bracelets that if you had both movements, and now they've said like really sometimes 1 is better. So it really is the feedback that you get from the bracelet.
Yeah. I'd be curious too if that client would be she might be too young to have like a phone or something, but I know there's like other apps that have I mean, big fan of the Keen obviously, but there's like apps that have like random like sort of random like noise reminders or things like that if she wants an option to just like sort of be like almost like an alarm to sort of call her attention to, you know, put her hand down there.
Yeah, that was my question because she does have a phone, but the phone is problematic. She's obsessed with the phone and utilizing it too much. So my question was, I assumed that you had to utilize a phone to do some aspects of it, but do you happen to know if you have to have the phone with you to utilize the bracelet?
You
Sounds
do
like
not.
maybe not.
Do not.
You do not.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good point. Thank you. Any other questions or cases? And if not, that's okay.
I have a case.
Yeah.
I'm working with, I think he's 7. He's 6 or 7 right now. And he has hair pulling. And I don't know if you have any tips for working with kids that it's sometimes harder for him to identify when it's happening or what's going on for him emotionally or cognitively. I don't know. We tried to track stuff using Scamp, and I don't know if it was maybe a little bit too advanced for him. I don't know if you have tips.
Mhm. Yeah, he might be a little young to try to track with Scamp. Do you ever notice does he ever pull his hair like in session or is it typically out of session?
Sometimes he will for a couple seconds, like he'll have his hand in his hair, but he's not actively pulling. It's just kind of in his hair.
Mhm. Like that's just the natural place he holds it. Yeah.
It's where he pulls too, but sometimes he'll just have it like he could probably pull at any second.
Okay. Oh, yeah. I think I know who you're referring to. I would be curious of just like starting with gentle trying replacements. Yeah, David, that's a good point. There's he's at an age too where there's like some good toys that he could use, or there's like a sticky pad. I know that some kids really like. There's a fidget that I can share with you that literally is a little toy where you can pull the hair out as well.
I like
So
that.
you could just try like gentle replacement right now rather than tracking to start, just to like get him in the habit, because that actually will help him to build awareness too, because it'll be like, wait a minute, oh, every time I want to go for my fidget, like I feel stressed or whatever it is. So like starting to kind of build that bridge and that connection, but gently. Oh, Brian's got some good. I think Brian threw something in the chat. Yeah, plucky sensory toy is a good one. And you can always like ask him what his preferred. I feel like everybody has a different like sensory preference. So is there something that he would like, something he'd be drawn to, for example, and maybe start like using that in session, or just have it accessible even in session, and kind of go from there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Can competing responses work? Allison, say more on your question.
I was just thinking competing responses for tics are sort of similar, perhaps. So creating a movement with the child that is actually preventative of what they are doing. I don't know if that works. It works so well for tics because they have a premonitory urge that they can learn to become aware of and utilize the competing response. So I wondered if that would work maybe for a younger child, particularly some different movement that's subtle and prevents the movement that they don't want.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I like that idea. Mhm. I like that idea a lot. Yeah. Questions or cases? But if not, that's okay. We'll reach out if there's anything else that I can help with.